Hello, I am Miguel Foze, and today let's talk about prophecies. Now, before we begin, the first and most important question that must be asked when writing a prophecy is, does it impact what the characters do? If the answer is no, that it has absolutely no impact on anything any of the characters do, that is what I would call an ineffective prophecy. Now, this is different from a self fulfilling prophecy, as we'll get to a bit, but this is where if you remove any instance of the prophecy, nothing changes. And why I call it ineffective is because it removes all character agency and it removes all stakes in the story. The characters are doing what they're doing not because they are choosing to do it, but because the prophecy says they're going to do it. Similarly, you know because of the prophecy how things will end. You are spoiling the ending of your book or your story by giving them the prophecy beforehand. Now, this isn't to say that you can't ever do an ineffective prophecy. It can still be done well. It's just very hard, and the whole point of the story has to resolve around a lot more of the loss of character agency than what the characters are doing and what they're trying to do. So everything else, let's talk about uh, prophecies where the prophecy itself changes the events. Now, there's two sort of subcategories in this answer. The first is what I could call like an additive prophecy or an improving prophecy. This is where the end result is still going to play out. You're just making it better. For example, let's go with a sort of standard default prophecy of a hero is going to rise up and try and take over the world, and then a hero will rise up and try and stop him. Now, without the prophecy, the villain will enact his evil plan, and thousands, if not millions, of lives will be lost before the hero rises up, goes to the villain, and defeats him, and probably dies in the process. Now, without the prophecy, the villain is still defeated, but so are all the other people the villain killed in the process. By having the prophecy there, you could actually end up triggering the hero to act early. The hero will be initiated and activated and start making plans to stop the villain before the villain has actually done anything of note. And the result of this is that you're going to have the hero confronting the villain before he's enacted his evil plan and stopping him there and most likely surviving, which means all the thousands, if not millions, of people that the villain would have killed are now also fine. This is what I mean by an improving or additive prophecy. The end result is still the end result. You're just making it better. The other kind of thing is obviously going to be a alterative or a changing prophecy, where the whole point is you want to stop the end result. You want to drastically change what the end result is. So if we go back to our prophecy, say without the prophecy, the hero will rise up and to confront the villain, but fail because he will not, the villain at that point would be too powerful. This is what could be mean. So by activating the hero early, he will be able to stop the villain before the villain becomes too powerful. That is the difference for this. You are changing the end result rather than just improving upon it. Now, for every prophecy, there are four components. that must be established. The first and foremost important part of a prophecy is establishing the prophecy's credibility. If you just have Hobo Jim round the corner shouting, "Oh, hey, aliens are going to come destroy the world," no one's going to believe him, and it will not impact any other character's things unless there's a reason to believe him. And it's very poor writing if it's just Hobo Jim, which everyone knows is crazy, shouts this thing, and the main characters just randomly decide to take it for serious and then follows it. That is extremely poor writing. Now, there are a few ways that you can establish your credibility of your prophecy. The first, and the easiest, is to have it come from a credible source. Just say, this person is well known for making reliable prophecies. Like you have the one old lady from One Punch Man. It's like, oh, the world's in peril. Or you could do stuff like that. I had another one where it's like, okay, this one person is the best sage who is always making extremely accurate prophecies. You could do like stuff like that where it's like you're establishing it by this person is very reliable at making very good prophecies. Therefore, if they make a prophecy, you are going to believe it. Second, the method of the prophecy is very reliable. If it's not the person who made the prophecy, but how they made it. Um, Like if there is a particular spell that will let you see the future, or a particular technique that will let you see the future, or if you have, it's very common to be able to see the future, which makes story difficult in itself, and every single one of them agrees this is going to happen, then odds are people are going to take that seriously. That's another thing where it's like, okay, the technique is very reliable, not just the person. Finally, you can establish credibility in the prophecy itself. This is most easily done when there is a delay between when the prophecy is given and when it carries out. Like if you say, oh, hey, the villain is going to rise up and try and take over the world in 100 years, you can establish credibility by saying in 20 years, this volcano is going to erupt, and in 50 years, there's going to be an earthquake in such and such city. So at first, they might not take it seriously. You still have to have enough credibility for people to even know this thing exists, but once have it be recorded, but then, well, oh, hey, 20 years down, oh, hey, this happened. This prophecy predicted this volcano. And then at 50 years after it, oh, hey, this prophecy predicted this earthquake as well. Maybe we should actually take the third thing that's talking about the villain seriously as well. Like I said, it doesn't have to be natural phenomenon, but it does have to be things that are unchangeable. So that knowing it or not knowing it will not impact that it happens. That is necessary for this to use this method. The second component of the prophecy is a trigger. The people you are trying to influence have to know when it is they're being expected to know change how they're behaving. If I just go, oh, hey, a villain will be defeated, and that's the entire prophecy, it's like, okay, what villain? Is it going to be in 10 years? Is it going to be in 100 years? Is it going to be in 1,000 years? Are they going to be defeated by cancer? Are they going to be defeated by the sun blowing up? By an alien? What's going on here? if you don't give a trigger to know when to start expecting the events to play out in the prophecy, no one's going to be able to actually have their actions moved unless it's intentionally something to be very, very uh, immediate. And a trigger can be anything on the long lines of, it's like, okay, you could have a description of a person, you could have a date, you could have a location, you can have an event, you can have a whole bunch of things, but it has to be something so it's very clear that it's like, okay, prophecy is starting now. And we'll get to more ways that you can play with this when we start talking about false prophecies in the end. Now, the fourth factor, I'm actually going to intentionally skip the third one, is you need a conclusion. You need a result of the prophecy. You can't just say, the hero will rise up. Okay, and do what? He'll rise up. Okay. Man with a cross-shaped scar will arrive at this town. Okay. What are you going to do with it? No, he'll just show up. It's like, okay, whatever. It won't impact their thing because it's like, it's a prediction of a thing that's going to happen. It's not itself a prophecy. That will be more of like, okay, they'll probably actually think that that is just an establishing credibility for something else rather than that's your prophecy because you don't give it anything it's supposed to be doing. Now it doesn't have to be, you can have it be super specific, you can have it be sort of vague, but it has to be something where it's like, okay, here is the end result of the prophecy. You have the credibility, you have the trigger, and here's what it's doing. This could be just like the villain is defeated. That's a result. The demon is destroyed. That's a result. The third part, the part that I skipped, and the reason I skipped it is because the other three parts are essential. You have to have these for prophecy to function. This part, you don't actually need it, and that is the body of a prophecy. It is entirely possible that you don't actually need anything in the body. You could just say uh, a child would be born with a star-shaped birthmark under the light of a lunar eclipse, and they will defeat the villain. And it's coming from like a well-known sage. So, okay, you have the credibility because it's a well-known sage. You have the trigger, the baby being born with a star-shaped birthmark, and you have the result, the villain being destroyed. You do not have anything else in the prophecy. And if that is enough for to impact people, because they will be looking for the baby with the star-shaped thing over the lunar eclipse, that might be enough to get the result you want. The point of the body of a prophecy of if that is not enough to influence the people. Like instead of, oh hey, the hero is going to rise up and stop the villain, you might show the hero is going to rise up, collect the stones of power, and defeat the villain. The collecting the stones of power is an extra step. It is the body of the prophecy. It is adding more information to help guide the people to doing what you want them to do. Now, the body of a prophecy can be as long or as short as you want it to be. Like I said, it is also entirely optional. It is just how much more additional information is needed to get the result you want. So we have these four different things of all these four components of a prophecy, and you can do all sorts of stuff with them. Now, before we talk about false prophecies, I want to actually talk about what a self-fulfilling prophecy is, because it's actually going to be tied into it. A self-fulfilling prophecy is where someone who is aware of the prophecy, actively trying to stop it, ends up causing it instead. Where in the act of trying to stop the prophecy, like, oh, hey, the child born under the light of the full moon will rise up and destroy the villain. The villain might see this, see the child born under the full moon, and try and kill the child, which will repeatedly try and kill the child, which actually will give the child incentive to rise up and destroy the villain. If the villain did nothing, if the villain ignored the child might have lived up and never thought to go after the villain because he would have not been incentivized. That is what a self-fulfilling prophecy is, that your actions are caused to stop it is what causes it in the first place. And the reason why I say it's related to what I'm talking about is a lot of people tend to have this notion of only the good guys are going to know about the prophecy. And that's not exactly the best way to do it, because the villains are going to know about the prophecy as well. Or at least they could. And this is where you can get into things called a false prophecy. Now, false prophecies is you are changing parts of the prophecy specifically to manipulate people into doing what you want by giving them misinformation. Now, for all of the four components, the only thing you cannot lie is the credibility. The credibility has to be telling the truth. You need to establish the credibility of your prophecy. That has to be true. You cannot manipulate the information of your credibility. You have to say, okay, yep, this is definitely going to happen, so people take it true. So that cannot be altered. Now let's talk about false triggers. A false trigger can do one of two things. You can either cause people to react at the wrong time or look at the wrong person. It could be along lines of, it's like, okay, um, child born under the light of the full moon, and it's actually they were born the month before. But again, it's the acts of this child born will potentially still trigger things going off. Or, oh, hey, the villain will do an earthquake in town A is your trigger. When reality is, it causes the villain thinks that, which forces the villain to act earlier than he would have planned. So when the hero rises up and stops him, something goes wrong. That could be an example of a false trigger. You're forcing people to take action by misinformation. Another a very, very good example of proper use of a false trigger. Let's say a prophecy of a well-known sage has said, um, in the town of Valencia, a swordsman from another country shall enter with a cross-shaped scar on his right shoulder, and he will uh, save a bunch of puppies from a burning building, and then stuff from the body of our prophecy, and then the villain will be defeated. Now, how is this a false prophecy? I gave you a very, very specific trigger. I could even go even further and say on this date, make it even more specific. Why it's a false trigger is, did I ever actually say the adventurer is the one who defeats the villain? I did not. All I said is the adventurer, the trigger, is the adventurer showing up in this town and saving a puppy from a fire. Nothing else in the prophecy will mention the adventurer, but the villain will think, because no one else is mentioned in the prophecy, the villain will think the adventurer is the person that's going to defeat him. And so he will be putting his focus on what the adventurer is doing and not on the soldier that's been in his army for 10 years plotting all this time on trying to defeat him. Without the prophecy, the villain might say, oh, hey, this guy's trying to stop me. I should stop him. Whereas with the prophecy, with the false trigger, not only will the villain ignore the soldier, but may actually even move him to a position that makes it easier for the soldier to succeed in the interest of stopping the adventurer. This is what you can do with a false trigger. You are manipulating the villain or the heroes to focus on the wrong target. That is something you can do. Similarly, you can do something like with a false body of, okay, you want A, B, and C to happen. A, B, and C are the events that actually will have an impact on the prophecy. But if the villain knows A, B, and C are the important things, they'll try and stop A, B, and C. So instead, you tell them D, E, and F will happen in the body. And D, E, and F will actually sort of manipulate the A, B, and C into happening, but the villain will be trying to stop D, E, and F, and they may actually overlook A, B, and C. So it's again, you are manipulating them to overlooking information that is actually essential. Now let's talk about a false result. Now there's two ways of doing a false result. The easiest is just to say, tell you what the stakes are. If I do a prophecy that says, oh, hey, the villain is going to rise up and take over the world. I don't actually want the villain to rise up and take over the world, but if I say, oh, hey, on this day, the villain is going to do this, and then he's going to take over the world, that will be enough so that when the trigger happens, the heroes will rise up to try and stop the villain from doing that. You're giving them an outcome to avoid. And yes, that is a false result. What the result you told them is not the result the prophecy is actually about. You want the heroes to defeat the villain, but you're telling them the villain will take over the world so that they know what is at stake. Now, if they defeat the villain, does that mean your prophecy is wrong? Well, that is what you wanted to happen. It might hurt your credibility in later ones, but that is what you wanted to happen, of the villain being defeated. Another way of using a false result is to get people to do what they would not have otherwise done. Like, let's say there is a demon that's going to emerge in this one field, and you want these two separate armies uh, to be at this field when it comes through so that they can kill it while it is still weakened. Now, if you actually said in your prophecy a demon will show up on this field on this day and the demon will be defeated, the people of those two armies might not take you entirely serious. It is very outside of the realm of what they are expecting. And so they might not come with a large enough force, or they might not even come at all. If, however, you manipulate your body and the result to say, oh, hey, to try and play the two armies off each other and say, oh, hey, two forces will meet on this field, and whichever force survives at the end of the battle will control the fate of the world. So you play up, oh, hey, make both armies think that, oh, hey, if they don't show up and defeat the other side in this field, the other side will determine the fate of the world. What you aren't told is when the two armies show up and the demon comes through, the demon is the other side of the engagement. The two armies are on one side, the demon is on the other. So that becomes a fate of, if the demon wins, the demon controls the fate of the world. If the armies win, the people decide the fate of the world. You are not technically lying, but you're manipulating your result so that they think each other is the enemy rather than the demon. And so they'll actually show up. One thing I actually would rather see a lot more of in regards to prophecies is the motion of, more often than not, when you see a prophecy, there's only ever one prophecy. There's no reason to have only one. You could actually have multiple prophecies encompassing the events of one thing. A good example is for one of my stories called God's Chosen. In God's Chosen, there are actually 5 separate prophecies, all regarding around the events of the story. The first story, it's actually like 5 separate books, I think it is, but it's like the first book itself is just the events of the first prophecy. So that one has its own trigger, it has its own body, it has its own result. But that result and the body is used as basically the establishing credibility for the other 4, and the result is the trigger for the other 4. And the other 4 are designed for different groups of people so that different people have different informations and level of how much their behavior has to be changed. And only 3 of them, 3 of the 4 are known. In fact, one of the whole points of like some of the later stories, the last book, is just trying to find out the truth and what is the final prophecy. That is what allows them to succeed and do that. But it's like it's 5 separate prophecies all on one character's course of events. You can do stuff like that where it's like, okay, the clergy needs to do X, Y, and Z, but the hero only needs to know X. So the prophecy that will be made available to the hero will be only the one that tells him X, whereas the clergy will be given one that has X, Y, and Z. And the villains might be one that gives them prophecies Y and Z, with possibly a false prophecy added into it. But you have to be careful because you need to make sure they aren't contradicting each other. And that is something I would really like to see more of, at this playing around with prophecies so that what you want to do might not actually be all that clear. People are taking it seriously, like in God's Chosen, the character who did it, that's their whole shtick, is they tell people the future. Like, their sort of initial thing of talking to someone is they will show you how you die. They are well established that, yeah, they are sort of out there. They don't think in regards to the present. They think in regards to like way into the future. And people take any prophecy this person makes very seriously because they can see it. And like I said, it's multiple different prophecies from one person about the same series of events. And you could do stuff like that. Can I think of anything else regarding prophecies? But now I find stuff like this to be very fascinating. And the fact it's like you have the very concept of a prophecy as being straightforward, when in reality there is so much more that can be done for it that I don't really see taken advantage of as much as I would want. So let me know in the comments what you guys think of all this. Anyway, I've been ranting long enough. Thank everyone for watching this long and my sort of crappy Blender model. I am Avae Prophecy. Have a nice day.